When we're talking about liquid coating, I've talked about wet film thickness. So when you liquid coat, you have the opportunity to check your film as you're going. And even though it's somewhat destructive, the paint is still in liquid form and still kind of flowing, so it pretty much heals itself before it cures, essentially. So usually you just stick this down in the paint and then it'll touch across these. They're at different elevations for film thickness, and then you usually will like put it on the back of your glove or something to see where it was actually touching. It is destructive when you stick it into the paint, but if you're careful about it and then or you touch that area up, then it goes away. Really important when you're spraying liquid coatings. With powder, it's more difficult. For one, the powder's charged, so when you bring anything metal up to it, then it likes to just cover everything because it still has a charge, and then you're bringing like your own ground to the part. If you just use one of these on powder, all of them just cover, even if it's not actually. So they have what they call a powder comb. It's sharper. It's very similar idea to a wet film gauge. So it's the same kind of thing. Technically, I think you're supposed to actually like comb it through the powder, but it's 100% destructive. And then of course you have to blow that area off and then touch it back up. So now that area is a totally different film thickness than what you just measured. But if you're just getting into a big run of spraying powder and you are trying a new spray pattern, that could be helpful to figure out like, are we roughly getting enough film thickness? This one from Delfesco, at least the one that we purchased from them, shows mils and it shows 20, 30, 40, 50. So that doesn't work because that's way too thick. I'm not sure if they have one that measures less, but if they did, that one would be more helpful. So since we had this one from them and it wasn't going to work for us because it was reading like we're never going to put on that many mils, of course I like to just design all my own stuff. If I can't find it, then I just design it and have somebody build it. So we had our own powder combs made, and so it goes up from like 1 mil all the way up to 11 mils, looks like. We don't use these very much anymore, but when we were first starting powder coating, we used them a lot because we were always spraying new parts and pieces and had new spray patterns. Essentially, it's the same kind of thing. We try to just set it right down in the powder and not move it very much, so that way we only have a little bit of marks, and then we just pick it up and look at where it was touching. It's not bulletproof, meaning sometimes powder will still jump on a peg that it shouldn't have just because of the charge and ground, but it gives you a good idea. Each one of these is for a mil. What we found was that you're not going to tell the difference between 1 and 2 mils on this. It's just too hard. You got too much powder starting to suck to it because of the charging that I talked about. But we have 3 sides here. That's helpful. It gives us a range so we can get an idea of like where we're at. Like, are we too thin? Are we just about right? Oh, this goes up to 16 mils, I'm sorry. So it would be like 1 to 6. You know, if it looks like it's only touching half, then we're probably too thin. If we flip over to the 6 to 11 mils and it's touching about halfway through there, then we know we have plenty because we probably have like 8 mils on there, which is probably too much for one coat. That is one way to test your film thickness before you cure your powder. It's always going to be destructive. You're always going to have to touch that area back up. If you don't, you'll see it right away once it cures out. But it does give you an idea if you're doing 100 parts the exact same. At least you don't have 100 parts that were all too light. This can help you dial it in on maybe the first cart, help you somewhat establish your spray pattern, and then you get the parts out of the oven from fully cure and check with a dry film thickness gauge. So once they come out of the oven, you can check these with a dry film thickness gauge. This is again from Delfesco. It's a Posi Detector 6000. You can get ones with a cord, ones without a cord, and some will just use steel, so ferrous material. Some will do ferrous and non-ferrous. The ones that do more types of metals are more expensive. So basically, once you get the part out of the oven and it's cool enough to touch, then you turn this on and you start pushing it up against the part, and it'll read what the film thickness is. And so utilizing this and utilizing one of these when you're first starting a project can really help you figure out what your spray pattern needs to be, because this doesn't necessarily equate to, like, if you says that you have 6 mils, that it might not actually be 6 mils when you cure it out. Some powders are going to be a little different, and so it's good to try both. Once you have an idea, like, okay, we did this many passes with this spray setting, and when we checked it with this, it always covered this one side 100%, and you flip to the other side and it wouldn't touch anything else, then that's a good double checker or guidance for your sprayers when they, like on one piece on the whole cart, if they could do a check and just to see, like they came back from lunch, so they might be out of rhythm. It'd be good to check that, one part that's on there, and then that can help them be like, am I at the right pace? Yes, okay, we're good. Now we know that these 100 parts that are on this cart are gonna be good and they're not gonna be reworks.